DFA fam, what is up? What is happening? We are back. We're on to week 8. Now, I'll say this week wasn't as bad as I think people expected it to be. We had some high scoring affairs, some games that I think shot out a little bit, like the Colts game. Went off 60 plus points scored in that game. So it wasn't all bad. There really wasn't too many major injuries. We have some things to talk about there, but for the most part, we avoided any sort of major injury to really discuss. So let's go ahead and just get right into it. Now, one thing to note: there is no buys in week 8, so that is positive after the week 7 apocalypse. Was it apocalypse, whatever we were calling it? But regardless, let's jump on to quarterback. And the first thing I want to mention: if Kyler Murray's sitting out there, he's rostered like 40% of leagues. He is definitely worth an ad. He should be stashed anywhere if you can get him, especially if you need a quarterback. He did take the first team reps this week, but Jake Glazer reported he may not come back until week 10, which is probably fine because I think they get the Ravens and the Browns each of the next 2 weeks. But past that, I will say Kyler Murray, it could be set up for a really nice run here. And, he's a guy that's been kind of a top 5, top 8 quarterback, when he's been healthy. So we'll see what happens here. But Kyler Murray definitely should be added to anybody who needs it. Next up, let's move on. Let's talk about the quarterbacks. Now, I think the number one quarterback that I want to stream this week is probably Derek Carr. Don't feel great about it, but he does have back-to-back 300-yard passing games and back-to-back 20 fantasy point performances. This past week, he threw for 301 and 1 touchdown. Should have had 2 touchdowns, but I feel bad for him. But Foster Moreau dropped what should have been the game-tying touchdown to end the game there. But he hit him right in the hand. Should have been a score. Should have been a second touchdown. But I will also say the Saints do rank 7th in pass plays per game. And this is a great matchup where Indy allows the 5th most fantasy points to quarterback. So really like this matchup here for Derek Carr. And then some of the other options, listen, I don't feel great about it, but I'm just going to throw it out there because it's kind of gross. Hopefully you don't need anybody, especially if their team's on bye. But Desmond Ritter completed 19 of 25 for 250 and chipped in 6 carries for 38 yards and a score. Over his past 3 games, he's averaging 295 passing yards, 1.6 touchdowns, and 19.6 fantasy points per game. Tennessee does allow the 8th most fantasy points per game to the quarterback position. And then you have Mac Jones, not sure where this came from, but he completed 25 of 30 for 272 passing yards and 2 touchdowns for 20 fantasy points today against the Bills. This was by far his best start since week 1, where he scored 25 fantasy points that week. And now this week, the Pats travel south, take on the Dolphins that have allowed the 10th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. And then lastly, Kenny Pickett completed 17 of 25 for 230 and chipped in 1 rushing touchdowns for 15 fantasy points. This was the first game all season we saw George Pickens and Deontay Johnson for a full game. While Pickett has been pretty bad this season, Pickett does have a tremendous matchup against the Jags, who allow the 2nd most fantasy points to quarterbacks. So these are kind of the quarterbacks I'm looking at. And then Jimmy G, he is expected to be back. I do have him on here. He's expected to return week 8. They do travel to Detroit and take on a Lions defense who just absolutely annihilated today. But so he's also in play.
Kicking on over to the running back waiver ads for week 8. I just want to list the San Fran running backs here. It looks like Christian McCaffrey is expected to play, but Elijah Mitchell's still sitting out there in like 70% of ESPN leagues. I realize he's probably rostered in most competitive leagues, but I still just want to mention him as well as Jordan Mason. Wouldn't be a bad idea to grab either of those guys ahead of the Monday night game if you have the roster space to do so. Then we'll mention some of the other names here. Latavius Murray, now with Damian Harris hitting IR, the Bills' backfield is down to a 2-man committee between James Cook and Latavius Murray. Murray also saw all of the goal line snaps in this game, as well as the 2-minute offensive snaps. He's going to be touchdown dependent, but with the running back landscape being as thin as it is, he should be rostered in 12-team leagues and deeper, especially, once this Bills offense looks better than it did today. That's going to mean more potential opportunities for Latavius Murray. And one of the most frustrating situations, we thought we were going to be getting like a 60% Zach Evans snap share, and we got none of that. Darrell Henderson was signed off the street last week. He came in, ended up leading the Rams backfield in usage. Royce Freeman was more efficient with his touches. However, he averaged 5.5 yards per carry to under 4 for Darrell Henderson. But with Kyron landing on IR, looks like Henderson and Freeman are going to be the backs to roster over the next few weeks. And the fact that Henderson came in off the street and led them in snaps and touches, I would lean toward Henderson here if you had to choose between the two. Another one that was frustrating as well was Amari DiMercado. He was someone that we that Kev had mentioned a few weeks ago on his deep waiver ad. And then we had the injury. We thought it was going to be DeMarcado. And then Damian Harris and Keontae Ingram came in last week. And then this week, it was DeMarcado who ended up leading the way. 80% of the snaps here, put up 75 total yards on 17 touches. Keontae Ingram did not register a touch. DeMarcado was likely dropped after Ingram and Damian Harris led the way last week. So he's an option, although it's really hard to trust after things have shaken out the past 2 weeks, but he's still out there. Pierre Strong is going to be a name to add here. Jerome Ford left with an ankle injury. Haven't really seen anything on the severity of it. It kind of looks like he could be out anywhere from like 1 to 3 weeks. The one Twitter doctor that I saw mentioned that it looked like it was a high ankle type of mechanism, but because his foot wasn't pinned on the ground whenever it happened, that it likely won't be that severe. But we'll still have to wait and see. But we've seen Kareem Hunt on the injury report multiple times this year, despite joining halfway through the season. So Pierre Strong actually also ended up playing 2 more snaps and ran 2 more routes than Hunt did. So he's definitely going to be in the run here. Threw Devin Singletary on here again. Obviously, the Texans were on bye week this week, but the last time we saw them, Singletary did lead the backfield in terms of usage and production. So I think he's a name to keep tabs on here as we move forward. Handcuff plus in the handcuffs here. Zach Charbonnet obviously did not play today, but I still think he's worth rostering in 12-team leagues and deeper. Kenneth Gainwell, Tyjae Spears, Justice Hill, and then handcuff only going to be guys like Tank Bigsby, Rico Dowdle. On the watch list, Keaton Mitchell is going to stay here. He did leave with an injury today, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be anything severe. I think he had 1 catch for 9 yards on the 2 snaps that he did play. Still worth watching. And then Chris Rodriguez for Washington. He actually somehow led the Commanders today in rushing yards with 31. Brian Robinson has not been good the past couple of weeks. It's now been 4 straight weeks with him being under 50 rushing yards. So he's a name to watch here if there ends up being a changing of the guard with Washington. So keep tabs on Rodriguez, who's the guy they drafted this year and got a lot of hype and buzz this offseason. Hasn't amounted to anything yet, but he's a name to watch going forward.
Yeah, I think for me, if I'm looking for a running back this week, obviously Darrell Henderson is the one that you want. And then I do think Amari DiMercado is going to continue to hold this role. I talked about it last week that I kind of said do not look to drop him because he still led the team in snaps last week. I know he didn't see the touches, but he still led the team in snap with 45%. And then this week, it was kind of a changing of the guard. So Amari DiMercado, is definitely the guy I think you want to own here. I mean, I think they made that clear with 83% snap share today for him, and he looked pretty good in the opportunities that he got. So Amari DiMercado is definitely going to be the guy I think you want here. And then let's jump over to the wide receivers and kind of got a list here of guys that I would look at this. But for me, I think Josh Downs, I'm shocked that he says he's only rostered in 36% of leagues. I really doubt he's available in competitive leagues, but according to Yahoo, he's only rostered in 36% of leagues. Downs put together his best game of the season, hauling in 5 of 6 for 125 and a score. He's getting closer to being a top 36 wide receiver rest of season. He's worth the top waiver ad if he's sitting out there, but so I just couldn't leave him off the list. But 36% really blew my mind considering how well he's played over the last 2 or 3 weeks. But Jahan Dotson, I put him on here, 53%. I get it. A lot of people are frustrated with him, but he finally saw some signs of life, being targeted 8 times today. He hauled in 5 of those for 43 yards. But who knows if this will stick, considering he dropped a key 4th down pass that hit him right in the hands. So he's going to be hard to trust, but he's worth a speculative ad. Take Dell. I don't know why, but he's only rostered in 46% of leagues. He should not be available in any league. He left with that concussion. Before that, he was balling. If he's sitting out there, I mean, I would put Tank Dell probably even ahead of Jahan Dotson. But anyways, Kendrick Bourne, 26%. Saw another 7 targets today. He hauled in 6 of them for 63 yards on a score. He did fumble in the 4th quarter, which, as we know, is something that Bill Belichick does not tolerate. But either way, he has scored 18 fantasy points in back-to-back weeks. With very little in his way, Bourne could have carve out a strong role in the offense, much like Jacoby Myers did last season. Next up, Jaden Reed wasn't really a huge day, hauling in 3 or 4 passes for 21 yards and a score. But one of the injuries that we will have to monitor this week is Christian Watson, who left with a knee injury. It's super frustrated with Christian Watson. This guy never seems to have he really does feel like Will Fuller, right? Like that was biggest Will Fuller's biggest problem. Super athletic guy, but just could never seem to stay healthy. Was always hurt, and this is right where we're sitting with Christian Watson once again. But if Watson misses time, Reed will go back to seeing a pretty healthy target share. He saw 20 targets over his first 3 games that Watson missed, and so with Jaden Reed, 16%. I'm definitely wanting to add Jaden Reed. Josh Reynolds only 24% rostered. The Lions got destroyed today on the road against the Ravens, but better days are ahead. The Lions are back home and take on the Raiders. And I think they get back on track here. And Josh Reynolds, I will note, has been much better at home than on the road. He's averaging almost a touchdown and like 70 yards at home versus on the road. So I do think Josh Reynolds at 24% is somebody that I would definitely look to add. And I think it's kind of a fringe wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 next week. And then Wandale Robinson, he did absolutely nothing, but I think in PPR formats, I definitely think that this is a player we should be looking at. He's averaging almost 6.5 targets per game prior to this game where he only saw 2 targets. But Wandale Robinson in PPR formats is definitely somebody you could look at. Elijah Moore, 46%. He has now received 14 targets over these last 2 games, but continues to see targets, but doesn't do a lot with them. He all did 4 for 59 today. The positive is that they do get the Seahawks and Cardinals defense the next 2 weeks, and the Seahawks have allowed the most fantasy points to wide receivers, and the Cardinals have allowed the 6th most fantasy points to wide receivers. So Elijah Moore is certainly somebody that I definitely think that I would want to have if somebody decided to drop him in your league. Michael Wilson, 19%. This is just a long-term ad, especially with Kyler Murray coming back. I want him on my roster if he's sitting out there, especially if the Cardinals trade away Hollywood Brown over the next week. McCole Hardman, 17%. I'm surprised. I was shocked, 17%, but I guess everybody got excited because he went to the Chiefs. But in his first game back, he saw 3 targets. Hardman should continue to see opportunities in a variety of ways moving forward with Justin Watson being out. Hardman brings an aspect to this Chiefs offense that they just don't have, that deep speed, that 4-3 speed that he has. He did see an end zone target as well. I think he's going to be a guy that's going to be pretty heavily involved, at least in terms of how the other wide receivers. I know Marquez Valdez-Scantling had a pretty big day today, but he's not on my radar. He has these type of games every once in a while. Rashee Rice, if he's sitting out there, I mean, I know he says he's rostered like 58%. At this point, I don't know what else the guy would have to do. So I assume those are like dead leagues at this point, because there's no way I could see any like really competitive leagues letting Rashee Rice sit out there. And then I put some other guys like Marvin Mims on here, especially if Jerry Jeudy were to get traded. I think then that's where you could look at somebody like Marvin Mims. But I have no idea what the Broncos are doing, why they don't give this guy more opportunities, but they don't. Julio Jones, he's 12, because I know people are going to see this name. They're like, oh man, I got to go out and pick up Julio Jones, who's on the Eagles. But the guy's like 30 plus years old. He's going to play an extremely limited opportunity. You're never going to be able to gauge. But if you are in some super deep league and there's just nobody else sitting out there, fine, I put him on there for you. And then some deeper league ads, 14 teams and above. Demario Douglas actually had 11 fantasy points today. He's flashed at times, and wouldn't be surprised if he carves himself out a role here. There's nobody else here in this wide receiver room outside of Kendrick Bourne. So Demario Douglas could be somebody that I think that could continue to see a larger role. Jalen Hyatt has had 75 yards today. He continues to flash within this offense, and I actually thought about putting up here into more of a add and all type leagues, but I just don't know if he's quite there yet because the Giants. But Jalen Hyatt is somebody that is definitely on my radar. And if somebody you wanted to add, I definitely wouldn't mind it. And then Tyler Scott, 3rd round rookie wide receiver, got a little bit involved today, but they didn't really have to throw the ball very much. More of a defensive battle. Deonta Foreman really dominated. Alec Pierce, and then Darius Davis. Darius Davis, actually, they tried to get him involved in a number of different ways, really kind of utilizing him kind of like, very gadget type wide receivers, a lot of jet screens and stuff like that. But Darius Davis, especially with Quentin Johnson just being an absolute zero, could be somebody that we could monitor in super deep formats. But I think that's kind of the list for me.
Yeah, I just want to say it doesn't look like it's a flash. Well, not a flash. It's not the word I'm looking for. Sorry, I killed a lot of brain cells yesterday, so not thinking straightly. But Josh Downs only rostered in 35% of ESPN leagues, so he does seem to be someone who is available across most leagues. But let's go ahead and wrap it up with the Week 8 tight end streams. Michael Mayer, his involvement and his usage, well, not necessarily his usage, but his snap share and routes run continued to stay at the levels they had been with the increase that he's seen in recent weeks. Didn't amount to anything in terms of production here, but there was also less than 200 passing yards to go around. And with Adams and Jacoby Myers combining for 25 targets, that's not going to leave a lot for anyone else not named Devontae Adams or Jacoby Myers. Better days are ahead for Mayer as long as this playing time continues to hold going forward. Logan Thomas, always worth mentioning here for in terms of a stream, had 4 for 51 today. Jonnu Smith, I guess this is going to be a thing going forward. He's probably someone I should have mentioned in previous weeks as well. Today was actually his worst game since week one. He still went 3 for 27. So if you are desperate, he's definitely someone you can look at going forward. Seems like he's going to continue to be used. He's seen like 6, 7 targets in the past couple of weeks as well. And then a couple guys here with asterisks next to their name. Luke Musgrave, he's going to be in that conversation, assuming that he's healthy. He obviously got lit up by Kareem Jackson today, but then he was officially ruled questionable with an ankle injury. So we'll have to see what ends up happening there. Trey McBride, Dalton Kincaid, both these guys are kind of in the same camp as far as they are splitting routes and snaps with another tight end. So kind of hard to trust here, but McBride, kind of like a 50-50 split with Zach Ertz. He did see 2 more targets than Ertz did today and had 10 more receiving yards and the same number of receptions. And then Dalton Kincaid today as the Bills were in catch-up mode, he had a 63% route participation and 21% target share. Actually ended up leading the Bills in terms of receiving and with yards and catches, and he was second to only Stephon Diggs in targets. So it's really hard to trust, with him still splitting time with Dawson Knox. But again, if you want to, if this could be something to continue going forward for Dalton Kincaid, that's obviously something that we would be interested in, as there hasn't really seemed to be a number 2 step up on a week-to-week basis for the Bills. Obviously, they drafted Kincaid to be that guy, so hopefully this is a sign of things to come, because it's obviously gross out there for tight ends.
Yeah, it continues to be kind of gross out there for tight ends, but I think you can get any sort of production. You're pretty much happy. I will say, if anybody would have dropped like Jake Ferguson or something like that happened with their being on bye and needing to treat somebody, he's definitely somebody that you should keep on your radar as well. So he'd be another name that I would look to add. I don't think there's any real questions in here. Kev is him. I just have to put that out there. He told me to go Hopkins, Cleveland kicker, 22 points. Yep, let's go with that. I did say, okay, CHB, Elijah Moore's the bust. So here's the thing. He's not been great, especially with all the hype that we've seen about him. But like players like him, like I still want to have on my team. And unless you're talking about like a 10-team league with only 5 bench spots, fine, you probably look to drop him. But any 12-team league, he should be rostered, because I think the opportunity is there. I think Deshaun Watson being in and out of the lineup with injuries hasn't helped either. And so, but in PPR formats, like I definitely think he's useful. We still have bye weeks going on, so while he hasn't been great, I definitely think he still would be. If somebody were to drop him in a league I'm in, I'm picking him up. Let me put it that way, just because I think the upside is there. It just hasn't really happened yet. Obviously, everything else has happened, and obviously super frustrating with Deshaun Watson. I think he played like a drive or two, and then he got knocked out. And then just remarkable enough that he got cleared to come back in, and they still held him out. So I don't know, because PJ Walker looked really bad. But anyways, that being said, I think we'll go ahead and get out of here. I think that's really all we got. Let us know in the comment section below if you have any questions, any waiver wire ads, who you should add, who you should drop. Let us know in the comment section below. And we will see you again very soon with the rest of the content for week 8. Have a good week, and hopefully you picked up those week 7 dubs, but we are a forward-thinking show. Time to move on to week 8. See you on the next one.